Hello and welcome to another episode of the UCLA Bruins Insider Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Connor Moreno, lead writer for UCLA Bruins on SI. Today is Thursday, so that means we are one day closer from UCLA's final home game of the season against Washington. So in today's episode, I thought we would kind of go through UCLA's media availabilities through the week, see what people are talking about, see what Coach Tim Skipper is talking about, kind of breaking down UCLA's keys to coming out victorious against Washington. Washington, obviously, as we've talked about, is a pretty brutal opponent among UCLA's kind of daunting second half of the season schedule. It's been it's been crazy, a crazy second half of the season schedule for sure. But I do think that UCLA probably has the best chance of winning against Washington out of any games that they've had. Maybe they had a better chance against Nebraska, especially because Washington is coming off a really good win against Purdue. But I do think that of the last remaining opponents, maybe not including Nebraska, so that's including Indiana, Ohio State, USC, that UCLA has a better chance of beating Washington, especially in the final. Yeah, there's a lot of storylines going into this final Rose Bowl game, potentially final Rose Bowl game of UCLA's program history. So there's a lot of storylines. I do think that it will be a good watch. So without further ado, I think we should break down the keys and kind of what Tim Skipper is talking about. We'll key in on Tim Skipper. I think that the first one I wanted to talk about was kind of what UCLA learned from playing against the nation's top two teams in Indiana and Ohio State. Yeah, like the way UCLA season was going, you thought that they were going to kind of go on this illustrious, magical run to end the season after winning three straight. And I think that was completely shut down, and UCLA was kind of reminded of exactly where they are as a program against Indiana a few weeks ago when they lost 56-6. And then, they lost to Nebraska in a close game, and then they were reminded of it again against Ohio State, just, completely demoralizing losses. But there's always something to learn from in losses like that, and Tim Skipper really agrees with that as well. So, during Monday's media availability, he talked about it. He said, whenever you're playing the number one and number two team in the country, you're always going to learn from those experiences. They're ranked that way for a reason. I mean, just the way they do everything, the way they operate, how they don't have a ton of penalties, how they're always gaining positive yards, they're never going backwards. Like all these things that you could just learn that all coaches around the country are preaching. So I think we went into the games fully prepared, went and attacked it. They went how they went, and then you hopefully learn from them, and it leads into a better next week. You know what I mean? Sorry, that was a direct quote. We'll learn from those games constantly, and we have 2 games left, and hopefully experiences from those games will carry over. So obviously, I think every single game you learn something from it, but especially against those 2 games, you lose to the 2 undoubted best teams in the country. You're definitely going to go into the next game against, of course, a lesser opponent, still a better opponent on paper than you, but you're going into the next games with a little bit more, I would say, confidence, just seeing how you stack up against the true top team in the country. So yeah, I think the next key we're going to talk about is Washington's kind of dynamic offense led by Damon Williams at quarterback. Tim Skipper shared kind of an early scouting report on their offense, especially Jed Fish is one of those coaches who's always going to have a pretty good offense. So what Skipper said was he's very dynamic, talking about Damon Williams. The quarterback makes them go. They're kind of a combination of a pro style and a spread. They'll give you 2 different kinds of looks, so we're going to have to be prepared for that. They have a lot of team speed. They break a lot of tackles, so the yards after contact, we're going to have to limit that. We're going to have to make sure we wrap up and tackle people, but the quarterback's so dynamic. I mean, when they throw the ball, it's like us when Nico's rolling. Like, you have to be prepared to contain the quarterback. You better have some spies and things like that. And then they have some good receivers with speed that get open. So it's definitely very challenging. We're going to have a good game plan, and we're going to have to execute it. And to be quite frank, UCLA's defense has done really good in this back half of the season, especially considering their schedule. I've said it again, and I'm going to say it one more time. You're going to say, Connor, they got dropped 56 on their heads against Indiana, and then Ohio State dropped 48 on their heads. But like I said, their defense was competing, especially at a level that is miles above how they were competing to start the season. So I do think that UCLA's defense has done really good, especially in the second halves of those games. Second half of Indiana, they did really good. They kept on competing. Second half of Ohio State, I was really impressed with how they turned it around. And because Ohio State could have probably scored 70 or 80 the way that UCLA was playing earlier in the season, but they came out in the second half. They competed. They looked at what they needed to look at, and they did really good. So yeah, I think UCLA's defense has done good, and they're going to have to have another test against Washington on Saturday. Another one is the running game. UCLA's running game has fallen off a cliff. I mean, honestly, they only had really one good game from their running backs, not just Nico Iamaleava. They had really one good game against Michigan State where Jalen Berger kind of erupted for 3 total touchdowns. I think 2 of them were rushing. Maybe one of them was rushing, 2 of them were receiving. But I think that was the key to the kind of magic that Jerry Neuheisel had early on when he was named offensive play caller. And since then, the running game has fallen off a cliff. Now, that is part in due to Anthony Woods, who was a pretty good revelation off the sidelines this season, having a really good year. He was hurt the last 2 or 3 games, so they didn't have that spark plug in the backfield. But regardless, they just haven't been able to establish a run game. So Skipper said it. He said, especially against Washington. He said, I mean, if you watch the Ohio State game, the box is loaded. Washington's going to load the box too. They've been that way every game. They play a ton of man. They're going to stop the run. They dictate everything to it. We played some very, very, very good defense stopping the run. That's the first thing I'll say. I mean, those boxes are loaded up, but we're going to have to continue and keep on doing that. Against Ohio State, we rushed it 25 times. We threw it 23 times. You got to keep blocking. You got to keep on moving your feet. You just have to keep moving piles forward, and eventually they break. But we're not going away from that. We're going to continue to try to keep winning in the trenches, and the trenches are going to be very important against Washington because 2 of UCLA's offensive linemen came into the practice week hurt, Garrett DiGiorgio, Ruben Unije. Tim Skipper did say that them 2, along with Nico Iamaleava, are day-to-day ahead of the Washington game. Local media who have been going to practices are seeing that they're full participants, at least for the brief stint that they've seen in practices. So it's looking like UCLA's offense might be, refreshed and healthy going into the Washington game, so that would be a good sign. I do think that if Nico Iamaleava has another game comparable to the Nebraska game, and comparable to the, other games that he had in wins, then UCLA will stand a pretty good chance against Washington. But I mean, we'll just have to see, because honestly, Nico's been pretty up and down, especially against the better team. That's kind of when he's sort of faltered. But against Nebraska, he showed really great promise in being able to be a leader and being able to lift offenses on his back. So that's going to be all we have for today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to the UCLA Bruins Insider Podcast, and we'll hopefully see you tomorrow.